Next VCR that I've got in the series, looking at G series. This one is in a Panasonic NV-G16. And I couldn't find a service manual for that. I don't have one, and I couldn't find one online. So we're just going to have to go without it. Let's have a look at the front of it, and then the back of it, and then we'll look inside and we'll check it out to see if it works, and then take it apart a bit more. So I'm pretty sure that this here, NV-G16 Panasonic, not National this time. Interesting. I'm fairly sure it's the same thing as the NV-G12 that we looked at in the previous video, but maybe it's a different version. Dark color scheme rather than the silver one that we saw on the G12. I don't know, it seems to have pretty much the same functions though. Standby, eject, the tape transport, and then channel selection for the tuner, the one-touch recording, counter it, controls there, still HQ, super still and super fine slow. And then under this door, which is unfortunately broken off, the little clips from the hinges are snapped, the TV tuner controls, then programming buttons, clock setting, TV VCR selection, the same buttons for tracking rather than a knob, picture sharpness control, timer record setting. More or less exactly the same as the G12. And it's the same story on the back. RCA video and audio inputs and outputs. The audio video inputs switch over to these plugs when you connect something to them. They have a switch in them. The RF in and out section and power cable, and that's it. So let's take the top off this and we'll see what's going on inside. Again, can't remember whether this works or not, though that may have changed. If it did work, it might not anymore, because it's been sitting around for a long time. Let's see, when we looked at the G12, that worked, but the head had like frozen solid. It didn't rotate at first until I poked it. Let's see if this is the same. No, that's free. Okay, maybe the bearings were a bit messed up on that G12. You can see that's been hot. Look, it's gone dark coloured. Forehead VCR. There's the newer back tension band with the plastic strip rather than that metal strip. To see what condition the idle it is in. Flux residue on the PCB. Just interesting, some parts must have been hand soldered or replaced at some point. Don't know, it's flux residue on quite a lot of things. Let's power it up, see if it does anything. The clock is flashing. Comes on. Stick in this and see what happens. Fast forward. Oh, it moves a little bit. Rewind. Yeah, not too bad. In play mode, pretty good take up in play mode. Oh, that's nice. The pinch roller sort of feels okay, and the back tension is functioning. Oh, that's encouraging. We'll join up the video output cable and see, will this do anything? It says there on what the plugs are on this, on the silk screen of the circuit board, so you can connect it without looking. That's nice. Last time the YouTube didn't like the video that was playing, so I had to blank it out, and if this works then we might have the same problem again. Let's see. Oh yeah, look at that. Oh, for a while it looked like it was working. Oh, I think the pinch roller is slipping. Let's try try pause. It's not locking in right on the capture, but on my screen it looks alright. You can see when clicking pause, the tape advances itself very slightly so that it can get the noise bar off the edge of the screen. Yeah, that doesn't work very well, does it? I think that's a result of the pinch roller not being very good shape. It must be too slippy. If I push it in a bit harder, it kind of works. Well, that's exciting. Another VCR that seems to be in fairly good working order, apart from those parts that wear out quickly and start causing problems. Everything else looks alright. In that case, let's take it apart and have a look at the mechanism and the electronics. And so in order to do servicing on these, if you want to get into any of this stuff, you've got to get the cassette loading mechanism out of the way. But then to do that, you've got to take the front cover off, or front panel off. So we'll do that first. Take a look in there. Undoing the red screws. Similarly, if you want to get this board out, you also have to take the front panel off, and you got to undo these red screws. You got to take the boards off of the front because they're attached by these hinge parts and cables that cannot be disconnected. They're soldered in place. And the next VCR after this one that I have is G20 and G21, and I already did a video about those, so I'm not sure if I need to do it again. Maybe we should do it again, have a quick look at them just for fun. I don't know, let me know. And something may or may not happen. Okay, so we've got to take the bottom cover off as well before you can get the front off, because it screws down using the same holes as some of the clips from the front panel. Pretty much what we've seen in the G12 and G10. The capstan motor there, part of the chassis, head motor there at the bottom, well, at the bottom of the head assembly, loading motor there, turns these gears to get things moved around and tape threaded up or unthreaded. Then a belt, which may have gone a little bit slippy, to bring the drive from the capstan down to here where it goes to the reels for pulling the tape back into the housing. Mode switch there for the electronics to know when the mechanical parts have got into a particular position depending on whether it wants what mode it wants it to be in, like play, recording, pausing, rewinding, fast forwarding. Another belt there that's gone a little bit slippy, so eventually it won't be able to get into play mode because it won't be able to turn the mechanism the final bit to push the pinch roller against the shaft, which will cause it to stop because it won't reach the final play position on the mode switch. So we got the bottom cover off. We can undo these clips and that will allow the front cover to come off. Front panel, control panel, whatever that thing is, like that. Now we have that out of the way. Oh, two things can happen. We can get these boards off so that we can lift up the main board, again with the red screws. So it will lift up like that. And the other thing you can do, you can't do it now, but ideally you get this board out of the way first, is you can get the loading mechanism out so that you can work on replacing this or the back tension band or brakes or something else. So what also needs to happen is two screws on the back around the RF IO stuff terminals panel, because that needs to come out because it's part of this main board. Let's see, now that we have everything released, this board should hinge up. The hinges are there, but before that can happen, need to undo some clips here that are holding the cables together. two of them. One there, and one in here. And then a little bracket thing will hold the boards in the out position, up position. Now it's possible to remove the cassette loading mechanism. Two red screws, which are somewhat captive, depending on how many times this has been undone. So that should lift up at the back, push back, and that will release it. There are plastic hooks there and there which go into metal tabs each side there, and this very delicate ribbon cable, because that blue stiffener part will peel off soon because the glue has gone bad. Can be disconnected, or you can leave it connected and load a tape in there for operating it, for doing alignment and adjustments. Now we can see in there that the tape loading mechanism is out of the way. The idler transfers the drive from that pulley we saw on the bottom through this roller here onto the reels, depending on which way it will swing to either side and turn the reels. There are brakes, different sets of brakes depending on what mode the mechanism is in. There's the record prevention switch for when you take the tab out of the back of the tape. That was missing on the G12 machine for some reason. Back tension band, which is adjusted there and pulled by this lever here. Tape goes around that post, and so when the tape slackens, the spring here will cause us to pull the band tighter around this so that it lets the tape out. Well, it makes it slightly more difficult for the tape to come out, to unroll from the supply reel, and a balance is achieved between the tape pushing on this and the band pushing on the reel and the pinch roller pulling on the tape, and that will set how tight the tape is through the mechanism and around the head. It's quite important to have that set right, especially as the pinch roller ages. That one looks not too bad, but it didn't function all that well. As always now, the retaining clip thing will have snapped. Got to crack down it so it won't retain it very strongly anymore. You can watch this thing here because that can get stuck on the shaft, the audio head, the erase head. A power regulator is in there. They can go dry joint and cause problems. So that's there to going down there. It keeps the head slightly warm or above the ambient temperature to avoid condensation forming on the head as the temperature changes in the room. Because if the condensation forms on the head, then the tape's going to get stuck against it, and that's going to cause big problems. Head amp there and head switching board and power transformer there on a board with some rectifiers and some capacitors and a bit of regulation. Now on the main board, you can see the infrared receiver there. It's still a module with circuit board in there, not all integrated into the one little light receiver thing like modern ones. You can see that board is soldered through the front panel board. So that there's the board inside this little metal box. Vacuum fluorescent display, crystal for the clock, another flex cable thing, power supply circuit, servo circuit, heatsink there on a motor driver, more servo stuff up on this sub board. Then there's motor driver for the loading motors, main processor in there. There's another processor underneath the VFD. You can see the pins of it there. Then other subboards for luminance, chrominance, TV tuner, and possibly audio on that one, I think. And maybe that's it. quick and easy. Alright, perhaps we'll try, since I've been saying it for long enough, powering it up and loading a tape into this while it's not attached to the mechanism, so we can see what happens. Let's power this thing back up. Now for servicing, if you can hold this right without getting your fingers caught in any of it, you can load a tape into it. And yeah, because you're not pushing the record prevention switch, it goes into play mode straight away. But now, it thinks everything's running, so if you can find some way of putting this down without shorting it out on various things. Oopsies, that's very bad. This screw just fell into where the AC power comes in. And so watch out for things like that. Just leave that sitting there. That screw's about to bail as well. It's retained by the plastic being slightly tight. Okay, so now you can get in there with your tension gauge and let's have a look, torque gauge, and check the take-up. Let's have a look. Oh, it's beyond what this one measures. Well, that's a good sign. Well, that's good, because yeah, it is fairly strong. It's not that strong, but fairly strong. I haven't got the other gauge over here, the one that goes up to the higher. But yes, with the loading mechanism out of the way and the machine running, you can get in there, measure things. You can check the back tension, get that adjusted right. You can see that the pinch roller is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Clean the capstan shaft because that ends up all tape goo all over it. And fast forward, I don't think you can go into rewind mode because I think it can sense that that one's not turning. Let's see, if I let go of that, you see, you have to be turning that in order for it to go into the rewind mode. Rewind while playing, otherwise it can tell. Just like that, it stops because it sees that that's not turning, so it thinks the tape's broken. Get this out. And put this back in. You see it locates on that thing there. So it goes in slightly back, and you pull it towards the front so that the clips there engage, and then you can do up the screws. Turn the power off and we can get that screw out of there safely. There it goes. Great, nice little machine. We'll put it all back together. Tricky part will be getting the cables back into their little hooky clippy thingies. That one there. Great, then hook everything back onto the front panel. That's all in position. Put screws back in there. We can put the front back on now. Now we got those in. There isn't really anything to line up with this because there aren't moving parts on the front. So as long as everything comes through the holes here for that and that knob, then that's pretty easy. Little cover thing for the head. I guess it's some sort of shielding. Make sure that these screws that screw into plastic are going into the right thread and not cutting a new one. You can feel it because they'll be fairly, if you can't feel it, go back a bit until it drops into the thread. Most of the time you can tell straight away whether it's going into the right thread or not, or it's trying to cut itself a new one. Don't cut a new one, because if you do that, then you'll be sort of chopping out the original thread and it will get stripped out very easily. Especially as this stuff ages, the plastic's gone very brittle, and so the threads will break out easily if you're mean to them. Okay, so it all goes back together pretty easily and quickly. Put the cover back on the bottom. Some screws for that. Yeah, Oh, it's just a little bit tight against the plastic there. Maybe it needs to push over a bit. Yeah, that screw hole is already worn out. They provide two. Not really sure why in some of these positions. Yeah, that one's still okay. I guess that was the original one and it's already munted out from people cutting new threads when replacing the belts and things. Right, well there you go. That's a fairly brief exploration, testing and tour of the Panasonic, this time not National, NV-G VHS VCR. That's up for this time. Stay tuned for the next video. Maybe we'll be having a look at the G20 again, or I don't know, I'll work that out later on. Maybe we have a little look at it and then we move on to the next one, which is going to be the G25, I think. Exciting stuff. So don't miss it. And also I need to get around to recording it. It's hard work to keep it up every week, outside of all the other things that are going on. But we must get through them all.